I'd like to share a poem this morning by the great feminist and thinker Adrienne Rich, and this poem is entitled Prospective Immigrants, Please Note. Prospective immigrants, please note, either you will go through this door or you will not go through. If you go through, there's always the risk of remembering your name. Things look at you doubly, and you must look back and let them happen. If you do not go through, it is possible to live worthily, to maintain your attitudes, to hold your position, to die bravely. But much will blind you. Much will evade you. At what cost? Who knows? The door itself makes no promises. It is only a door. As we learned this week, or I learned this week, maybe many of you knew this already, but as we learned this week, our current administration has been deporting children at an extremely high rate, hundreds of them a day. At the height of this particular type of deportation, 500 children. And I'm not talking about 17-year-olds, I'm talking about very young children, who as they await deportation are sitting in detention centers where the light never goes out, is never turned out, so they can't sleep, and who, by all reports, are being given food that is full of worms. It's made me think back, and I know some of you have heard me talk about this, but it's important for me to speak of it again. It's taking me back to the first administration of Donald Trump in the week when he decided that, illegally, of course, he decided that all those who wished to cross the border and seek asylum had to wait in Mexico for some kind of mythical permission he thought he could give. He also decided at that time that only roughly 20 people a day, if that, would be processed through and sent to the freezing cold detention centers. I was there that week. I went to volunteer with an organization called Al Otro Lado, which means at the other side. And Al Otro Lado provides asylum legal advice to those seeking asylum, and lawyers from all over the United States come to volunteer. And I was there as a chaplain and as a translator to provide counsel and comfort, and also to conduct weddings and to give folks a certificate so that they wouldn't be separated from their children. And I remember coming to the border and seeing a very different picture from what I had seen back in the 70s when I first went to Tijuana. In the 70s, it was a thriving ecosystem of folks who lived on either side, had jobs on either side, al otro lado. They were going back and forth and living actually in a large multicultural community. When I went back several years ago, there were yards and yards and yards of brand new granite with sharp edges and miles of brand new shiny barbed wire, and soldiers who were carrying weapons that were as long as they were tall. They looked like, for all I know nothing about weaponry, but they looked like grenade launchers. I don't know what they were. And I watched them chase women and children into the bathrooms with these weapons. And I thought, yeah, because most people there were women with their children seeking to pass through that liminal door from a past they could no longer tolerate into some kind of better future. I remember how quiet the children were, how terrorized, how traumatized. I remember many things, but this week I thought of the woman whose face ran with tears and who looked at me as she held the hands of her two beautiful young girls and said, "They can shoot me now, I don't care, but I want my children to make it to safety." They have an aunt in Seattle, and she will take care of them and she will help them grow up. She wasn't the only parent who spoke. of doing anything, as we all would, for our children. We, in ways that perhaps we were not during the first administration of Donald Trump, which had its challenges, to say it mildly, we are in a new place. We are in a new borderland. And back then, pretty much if you were a person of racial and financial privilege, you kind of got away without being completely under attack, but that is no longer true. Unless you are a billionaire, none of us is safe. And so we find ourselves, through no choice of our own and no consent of our own, we find ourselves in this borderland, and borderlands and liminal spaces are really, really hard to negotiate. Susan Beaumont is a fantastic church consultant. She knows everything about churches. I've taken some of her courses, and she talks about how liminality in churches is a really big problem, because we don't want things to change, and yet they're changing all the time. The people, the ministers, circumstances. We want to go back to a time that was safe, but that time never happened. That time was never what it was, and we can't go back. Making America great again was always a lie, and it is still a lie. And we want to rush through to another side that's going to be better and that's going to be at least more comfortable, and all we can do is look for the glimmers of what a new world can be. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, in his famous mountaintop speech, told the world that he knew he would not make it to see the promised land, but that he could see what it looked like. I may not live to see. Some of you may not live to see the world we've dreamed and worked for so many years. Doesn't mean we can give up. But that's the truth. We have no control over anything except our own choices. And so I'm here to invite us, to encourage us, to call us all into a moment where we say, we know what this is, we see it, it's terrible, it's hard, and we are going to dig deep and find our power. We have power. The people of Minneapolis have taught us that. The people who stand in the reddest districts in the country protesting new detention centers know they have power. All of us have power. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, made a speech that became kind of famous at the Davos meeting, the meeting of the rich and famous in Switzerland every year. And he said, the old world order is finished. It's crumbling. It's done. And then he said, nostalgia is not a strategy, which I think is a great statement. Nostalgia is not a strategy. Depression is not a strategy. Fear is not a strategy. And I'm not judging any of us, including myself, for feeling all of those things. But learning our power and imagining as fiercely as we are able that we can make choices in every minute of every day to live from our values. Congressman Ro Khanna, you may have heard him recently. He's all over the news because he's been a ferocious defender of the survivors' rights, survivors of Jeffrey Epstein. And I heard him on an interview. I was listening to him on the radio, and he was yelling at his fellow Democrats. And he was saying, "We need a bold new liberalism." And I said, "You said it. You said it, brother. We need a bold new liberalism." We need a liberalism that, according to a center called, funnily enough, the Center for a New Liberalism, which has roughly 80 chapters around the world. I mean, I love it when they name themselves for exactly what they want. It's a liberalism that doesn't just subsidize change, but it is a liberalism that fights for change. That just doesn't just try to alleviate poverty, as great as that is, but to change the structural causes of poverty. And then Congressman Khanna continued to yell at his fellow Democrats, and he said, not only do we need a bold new liberalism, we need a fighting faith. And I said, hello. I loved hearing about the UU minister who does martial arts, because guess what? We need that minister. I'm not here to advocate politics of one kind or another, but I am here to remind myself and all of us that we know the difference between right and wrong, and people around the world and people in this country know the difference. We know we have a moral compass. And even if we grew up in a faith that tells us that we are so terminally flawed and sinful, we know better. It's not that we don't make mistakes or that we don't hurt one another, but we know what's right and wrong. No matter who people voted for, they have shown us and themselves over and over again. It is wrong to incarcerate and deport children. It is wrong to kill people in the streets. It is wrong to invade a nation with no provocation and spend tens of billions of dollars that are needed for the people of this country. Those things are wrong. And our faith, again, as flawed as it may be, our faith is a fighting faith for the dignity and wholeness of humanity and for the future of our world. And it is a faith that teaches us to fight for that, even if we will never see it ourselves. Berkeley University has a research program that's actually called the Greater Good Research Program, which I love. And they have a magazine called the Greater Good Magazine. If you have a minute, look it up. It's fantastic. And the scientists have been doing research on economics and who we are as people. Perhaps like me, you were taught that we're essentially greedy, right? That we're all out for ourselves and we don't really care, and we just have to get as much as we can. But that's not true. We're wired for cooperation and collaboration. Why? Because none of us are arrogant enough to think that we don't need one another. So I invite you, dig deep, find your power, and choose to act. Choose to follow your moral compass, and I know you do, but I just think we need to say it out loud, and maybe talk with our friends about it, and maybe invite people, as many of you have, to come and be part of a community that is here not just for us, but for those who will come after us. We have to fight with more than our head. We have to fight with our hands, with our voice, with our hearts. And just remember, love wins, and if love hasn't won, it isn't over. Amen, dear ones, Ashe, and blessed be.